On this episode of Doing the Most, we're going to talk about some natural, grocery store friendly ways you can balance your homebrew.
Homemade brews and various how-tos, everything from mead to roast, bake creation, fermentation, inebriation, doing the most.
Now, you may have seen our Tri-Force of Balance video, probably the only video I'm ever going to put out doing a deep dive on how to balance your homebrews. And in it, we talk about acid, tannin, and sweetness. Today, we're going to talk about acid, tannin, and sweetness, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective of not wanting to use homebrew store powders. There may be a number of reasons you don't want to use powdered amendments from your local homebrew store. One reason may be that you're brand new to homebrewing and just don't want to invest in this kind of stuff. Or maybe you live in a part of the world where it's hard to find this kind of stuff. So I thought it would be fun to do a quick video talking through the various ways you can balance your homebrews with stuff from the grocery store. First off, let's talk about acid. The three common ways of balancing acid in your homebrew are by using citric, tartaric, or malic acid. And sometimes you'll use lactic acid, but lactic acid is more commonly used in sour styles of beer. It's an intentional flavor adjunct, not something that you're necessarily fine-tuning. Citric acid is actually usually available at the grocery store in the baking aisle. That's actually where I got this bag of it. I got it for acidulating the milk when making mozzarella. But say you don't want to buy a giant bag of citric acid from the baking aisle in your grocery store, a great option is lemon juice, and that can be lemon juice from a bottle or lemon juice from a lemon. Now, a thing I'll point out here, each of these things I'm going to discuss for balancing does have the potential to add some flavor, not just acid, tannin, or sweetness. So just be aware of that. If you need a ton of citric acid to balance out a wine or mead, adding a bunch of lemon juice might actually add a bunch of lemon flavor. So tread carefully. Citric acid is bright and somewhat sharp. Tartaric acid is very sharp, sharper even than citric acid, and it's a common acid in grapes and also available in these little bags of acid from your local homebrew store. But say you want a natural source of tartaric acid. Well, I would recommend getting yourself some preservative-free tamarind paste. Tamarind is very sour and is actually very high in tartaric acid. If you're in, say, the United States, tamarind paste is typically found in the international section of the grocery store. Or some stores actually have tamarind in stock with the produce. Tamarind paste is simple to make. You basically just shell your tamarind, soak it in hot water for an hour, strain it off, and peel all the pulp off of the seeds and other fibrous material. Once you have the pulp off, you strain it through a sieve, so all you're left with is tamarind paste. It's kind of a brown, super sour paste. And you can dose your homebrew with a little bit of tamarind paste to add tartaric acid. The third of the big three acids is malic acid, and it's very common in apples. So you can use apple juice as a way of balancing your acid. If you want to fine-tune it a little bit more, you can actually use apple juice concentrate from the freezer section in your grocery store, and it's a much more concentrated form of malic acid. Just a side note, red grape juice concentrate in your grocery store's freezer section is also a very concentrated form of both malic and tartaric acid. That brings us to tannin. Tannins are polyphenols that come from plants, and they're typically found in stems, seeds, and leaves. So if you're looking for a good tannin balance option at your local grocery store, check out the tea section. A nice black tea or a white tea might be a good option for tannin in your brew. Tannin can also be found in grapes, so you could peel some grapes or use grape seeds or stems as a source of tannin in your brew. You'd want to make sure to dry them out and kind of grind them up before you put them in there so you get good extraction. And as a last resort, you can use raisins as a source of tannin, but it takes a lot and it's a very soft tannin. And so if you're looking for something nice and heavy and robust, raisins aren't a good option. For that reason, I'd really recommend tea for tannin if you're looking for something at the grocery store. And the last element of balance is sugar or sweetness. And there are an abundance of options at the grocery store. But just remember, if you're using a fermentable sugar like cane sugar, beet sugar, honey, or agave, You want to make sure that your brew is pasteurized, stabilized, or sterile filtered before you add it, or else the yeast still in suspension will gobble it up. Unless, of course, the yeast have reached their alcohol tolerance or you've hit your Del limit in the brew. Sucrose, like cane sugar, is really the cleanest form of back sweetening that you can do. Dextrose, corn sugar, is another good option. But some back sweetening sugars for balance provide other interesting things. Like brown sugar, for example, is going to give you some caramel and molassesy notes that kind of give an extra undercurrent of flavor to your brew. Agave for your brew gives it kind of a tart, punchy form of sweetness. Or you could use a non-fermentable sweetener like the sugar alcohols erythritol or xylitol. Or you could use monk fruit powder, which is incredibly sweet and just a tiny, tiny touch can sweeten an entire brew. I've played around with it and it is powerful stuff. And then of course there are artificial sweeteners like sucralose and there's sweeteners like stevia, but both of those taste kind of gross when back sweetening a brew. I would stick to something that includes sucrose, fructose, or glucose, or a sugar alcohol that has a relatively neutral flavor. And say you're trying to add some acids and some sweetness, those canned frozen juice concentrates can be a good option. Say you want to back sweeten and punch up a cider, using part of a can of frozen apple juice concentrate can add extra apple flavor, but also that malic acid and just a nice hit of round sweetness for your brew. So pro tip, if you're dabbling with all around balance, you might play around with some frozen juice concentrate in some samples of your brew. I'm curious if you have other interesting options for natural, grocery store accessible ways of balancing a brew. If you do, you know what to do. Drop them in the comments. And of course, you can find us on Instagram and Pinterest at Doin the Most OK. Follow us on Twitch at Doin the Most OK. We have a Discord server and a website, dointhemost.org. If you found this video helpful at all, I hope you will hit subscribe and ring that bell for notifications. We do a ton of homebrewing content here on the channel, so I'm sure in the future you'll find something that's helpful or at least entertaining. Until next time, happy brewing, stay safe, and cheers!